What is up, my dudes? Saw, dude. Waiting for everybody to get on in here. What's up? What's up, Dingus Pingus? You have the best name, dude. Oh, whoa. 5 weeks at the North Pole. That's awesome, dude. It sure is flat. It sure is. What's up, Tom? Chart Chief. Ooh, I like that. Tell that to Finra. Did the market close before today? As in like earlier? It was an early close. Yeah, it closed at 1 p.m. It was a half day. What's up, Kai? Bread and butter is here. Save some of the crusty bits for the rest of us. Hey, Gamma Chat's here. What's up, man? Good to see you, sir. Good to see everybody. Yeah, pretty interesting close here, I will say. I guess not, not ultimately surprising. Sometimes, right, I'm always like, ooh, are they going to do something different? Are they going to play this in a way that's not necessarily predictable? Are they going to start to rock us or do something like that? And then, nope, we just get shorted into the close for a max pain finish. I mean, just that's just a little funny, to see that. I don't know. They did it. They did it 5 minutes prior to the close. So I don't know. Is that not technically a bang the close? I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, so this is a point that I touched on very briefly a couple times this week and a couple times over the past couple weeks, right? And I mentioned this in the sense that like what's very uncommon about what's strange about what we're seeing and what's a little bit different than what we're used to is that we are off cycle. So a very significant, right? We have to ask the question, okay, like what drums up volatility? And right, a very significant portion of what drives GameStop volatility is the emergence of this internalized buying pressure, right? So as we go up, right, GameStop's IV goes up with it. As what I'm guessing is right, part of what this is like major institutions, right, are in like I suppose it's something like they're in short swap positions that requires them to, I guess, account for somehow like extended synthetic liquidity with respect to these short swap positions. When we start to move up, the premiums on those short swaps, I guess maybe that's it. Maybe it's not so much having that synthetic liquidity as much as it pertains to interest rates. So like part of the trick with this stuff, let me see if I can bring up like a little like squiggle board here or something. Should be able to do this in, right? Can I do this like here? Just get a brush, just like draw. Yeah, okay, I can do that. So let's draw here. Let's see, is this visible? Yeah, we can do this. So let's say you have a short swap. So you have a short swap right over here. Okay. So yeah. So you have a short swap position over here. Part of what is involved here, right, is this short swap is going to pay premium over to the long party here, whoever's on the long side of this, on a regular basis. So they're handing over premium. All right. That premium is based on, it's hard to see there. There we go. That premium is going to be based on the price of GME. So let's say you have a prime broker and a hedge fund. So on the right, you're going to have hedge fund, or excuse me, on the left, you're going to have hedge fund. And on the right, you have prime broker. So if GME's price gets low, the premiums that the hedge fund ends up paying over to the prime broker get very, very low. And then when this swap expires, there'll be an exchange of cash and securities in which the hedge fund in particular will benefit from the difference in the price of the underlying versus when the swap was entered into. So this is a total return swap. The prime broker doesn't really care about what's going on with the swap. So the prime broker will go ahead and hedge this, and the prime broker will go and also hedge their, they'll collect basically just the premiums. Okay, well, there's a chance that the premiums will decline in value, so they'll go ahead and they'll hedge the premium payments they're getting with an interest rate swap, because this premium is based on the price of the underlying securities and it's based on the SOFR rate. So it's based on interest rates. So they'll hedge this, so they don't care about the price of the underlying. They'll get an interest rate, right? Okay, so in particular, right, hedge funds will be concerned about their particular swap position, because as the price of GameStop goes up, or as the price of GameStop goes up, they'll have to pay increased premiums over to the prime broker. So what they'll do is they will try to internalize buying volume that, using this whole extended ETF apparatus, or use options in order to hedge, this particular dynamic flow of pricing, right? So they'll try to juggle this in order to offset their premium payments and keep their margin balances intact. Okay, so as, let's say, GameStop's price goes up, they will need to hedge their position by purchasing shares of the underlying or having some sort of like-kind offsetting securities. They can borrow shares to do this. They can have shares of an ETF that can count as a sort of offsetting like-kind security. It needs to be hedged proportionally somehow. They can also go to the options market, right? So what they may be doing, right, what IV basically may be showing us is incentives on the part of, basically brokers and their connections, I suppose, options dealers and their connections to hedge funds or whoever might be entered into these GameStop short derivatives in order to get access to options to create liquidity in the options market. So as the price of GameStop goes up, demand for GameStop's options go up as well. And so the price of the options is increased in order to incentivize essentially sellers to come in. Now, the options market maker will also make a significant amount of money based on retail getting excited and coming in, right? Retail will come in. Inexperienced options traders will come in and they'll spend a lot of money on bad bets. So the options market maker is certainly happy about that. Many traders are certainly happy about that. Well, traders can benefit from demand, but trades don't actually take place between individually separated parties. Whatever options trade you take, this may be for some of you who might be relatively new to this, right? Whenever you go out and take an options trade, you are not trading with another trader, right? When like I'm a retail trader, right? I imagine all the people watching this are retail traders. I don't know why you would care about what I have to say if you're a pro, but you know, you're not trading with other retail traders, right? I see like people come on and like try to bully folks on Reddit or try to bully, you know, there are these like kind of GME bully sort of, you know, subreddits, or people on Twitter will be like this too, like, oh, I'm selling calls to, you know, apes and whatever. It's like, you're actually not, right? You're selling calls to Wolverine Trading. If you're trading GME and you're selling options to Wolverine Trading. That's it. That's who your partner is. That's who it will always be. Trades do not go through. Trades will not go. You will not be matched with another retail trader. Every single trade is going to be marked, through the options market maker. Same thing with equities. If you're buying and selling shares of GameStop, it's entirely going through Citadel. It's entirely going through the equities market maker. It's automatically getting marked at the mid of whatever it is, right? And this is kind of an inter-agreement among market makers, among broker dealers. Any retail trade is automatically getting marked at the mid. It's not even, right? There's no matching at all. There's no matchup. Oh, this party and this party and this party. If you're a retail trader, there's no matching. Okay, so back to this question of volatility, right? So swap holding institutions, swap holding funds are going ahead and offsetting their positions through the options market as the demand to do so increases, which typically increases as GameStop's price goes up, right? Because they have increased need to hedge their positions with respect, as their, I suppose, as their premium payments go up, hedging requirements go up as well. So there's more demand in the options market, which brings in, right, more IV and so on and so forth. Okay, so where is the IV? Okay, so first off, it seems to be, right, there are several components on a regular basis to GameStop's IV. Let's see, I can bring up, let's bop over to Thinkorswim real quick so you can visualize what is going on here with IV. We'll talk about a few moments where IV does have a tendency to increase and what those factors in particular are, or what we can guess them to be, and what they pretend to be, right? Because this is always part of the trick. Yeah. This can be down here. Let's bump out to 2 years. Okay. So here's our IV chart. Actually, let's get a little closer in here. Let's go out to October. That's better. Okay. So as we can see, right, there are some particular moments where we see implied volatility go up, right? So partially this is going to have to do with quarterly earnings and sort of lead up to quarterly earnings. So for example, this little bit here has to do with the lead up to quarterly earnings. This one here This one here, this move, this kind of cat ear pattern back here, 2023. This one going up into March earnings. This was not. Although we did actually, this second spike may have been related to. I mean, it ended up coinciding with earnings release. In any case, so there was a background effect there. And we had this September one. December's obscured because of what was going on in November here. We had another lead up right here. Smoother, but we still had a lead up right into March. This little Volga period. And then this was connected to the Bitcoin thing, but kind of front ran earnings effect a bit, and it came down. So the earnings effect likely also has something to do with swaps being able to disguise what's going on here in terms of repositioning with respect to swaps. This maybe anticipating this has an effect on the appreciation of the underlying of the IV. Right. So in particular, the question as far as like what happened to IV this time around, right? So IV usually falls off after earnings periods in general, likely connected to whatever is going on with these particular swaps. But at the same time, right, usually there's also, right, we've seen, for example, like back here in November, December, right, we had a lot of IV sort of stored up. And then it took a bit of time for it to really, really kind of fall off. Now, part of this had to do with being shorted, right? Things being packed away into ETF land. We had this little blip here with respect to some of that volatility coming back, and then we sold off and bottom before moving back up in anticipation of earnings. So we're really falling off a cliff, largely because of, well, part of it is also because of the time of year. July is a very flat time of the year. July and August are kind of the slowest parts of the year. Last year, we had something pretty similar. I mean, we had a lot of background IV as well, sort of still coming off of what was going on with the Roaring Kitty return here, right? Moved up here. But you can see how far down we fell. It just took time for us to really start moving back in the other direction. But still pretty high, right? But it took time for it to come back. And then we sold off kind of another decent Volga period, I guess, here until we bottomed out down here. So what's going on now? Our volume is extremely low. It's a very slow time of the year. All of the volatility that was essentially, right, so it took a long time for this to kind of sell off. It took a very long time for this to sell off. By basically doing this bond offering, all of the volatility got sold basically in a period of a few days. So it's just waiting, waiting for some sort of catalyst to come back to start moving us back to the upside. The longest, we may just kind of hang out down here, right? We may hang out here for a while, unless there's some kind of gasket, to let some of this off. But part of the thing is, like, a lot of this internalized kind of ETF charade volatility can just be, a lot of this could have been covered. Like, volume was so crazy high back here, right? 172 million in a day, and then 15. Like this, the very next day, this was almost 60 million, right? Like just this volume here. A lot of FTDs could have been cleared. A lot of ETF stuff could have been cleared. There was a lot of shorting that didn't require that whole ETF charade thing to happen. Yeah. So it is nowhere to be accounted for. As far as the bond traders go, I wonder to what extent a lot of what they're doing is just happening off exchange, right? So pointed this out earlier this week as well. So if we take a look, actually we have to bump back here. This short volume. This is just short volume. Here we go. All right. Wow. So this was today. Yeah. Today's volume pretty low. So as you can see here, right, we're having the majority of GameStop's volume these past few days is off exchange. So today, yeah, lowest, yeah, not even 3 million, 2 point something million in volume, lit exchange. So it's very, very low. I would expect a lot of the hedging that has to do with the bond traders at this point is likely happening off exchange. So they do keep shorting after becoming delta neutral as they need to adjust their position. So as the value on the bond, so as the face value goes up, right, as the delta increases, so as the price increases, as the delta increases, they are going ahead and continuing to short that, right? So as the delta increases, if they don't go ahead and hedge their position, if they don't dynamically hedge their position, then they end up not neutral, right? They'll end up slightly delta positive. So they will keep doing that. I know, definitely a snoozer. I mean, right, there's definitely, there are definitely things to do to collect some premium. I mean, options may not be as ideal as they were like a month ago or something like that, but there are things you can do. I'm starting to experiment with doing some like cover call spreads. So things like kind of, right, because you get into this situation. You have this problem where you say, okay, well, man, IB is really low, but this is a weird situation. It's a slow time of year. We don't have a clear catalyst necessarily coming up until, well, earnings. Institutions will be filing around August 15th. That's a ways off. We've still got about 6 weeks until institutions file for Q1. Excuse me, for Q2. So we have their Q2, not GameStop Q2. So a question in terms of like, okay, what to do, let's say, to manage this situation, like, okay, we're going sideways. What to do to really kind of manage this? Like, okay, our trading ranges are getting tighter. One thing that I'm trying to do is sort of start to, let's say, stagger or spread out, right, certain covered call bets in the sense of, okay, like we can get closer to the money. But let's say we can get closer, but let's only go like a week out, right? And then let's go maybe a little bit farther up, but we can go, 2 weeks out, and then a little bit up, right? And sort of divvy this out. And then what you can do under those conditions, you might say, well, these aren't kind of optimal premium targets. This isn't optimal for kind of that $1, like last week, right? We talked about getting that $1 a month average there. It may not be optimal, but right, part of what keeps that average what it is, some months you have really crazy IV premiums and, maybe you're doing $2 or $3 of, per share per month. And, then other months, maybe you're doing 50 cents or 75 cents per share per month. And so that kind of averages out in aggregate to, that $1 or slightly above $1 average target. That's, seems like it's a pretty conservative target, but it's, very doable with respect to GameStop. So under those conditions, right, like these past 2 weeks, right, definitely I was thinking like, wow, we're getting close to 52-week lows. We actually logged after logging a 52-week low last week, we did another 52-week low, beating that previous low today. So it's definitely the lowest I've ever seen. Right, and it seems like, okay, somewhere in here, this will start moving to the upside. But is it going to be in a week? Is it going to be in 2? Is it going to be in 3? Is it going to be in 4? Like, do we have to wait until FOMC at the end of the month You hear something about interest rates, and what happens if interest rates don't move? What's going to happen? So, this is a way, I suppose, if you take this kind of covered call spread approach across expiries and strikes, what you can do is essentially distribute your risk. You can take advantage of some of the higher premiums for, you can have a smaller portion of let's say, your covered call trades, with a slightly closer strike to the money, right? Let's say 25s, right? We're trading in the upper 23s, 24s, like 25. That's so close, and yet it's still staying out of the money, right? This is like 3-4 weeks in a row at this point, right? It's June, July 3rd, so 3 weeks, certainly 3 weeks. 13th, let's see, 13th, 20th, 27th, 30th. Yeah, 4 expiries in a row now. It was out of the money. So, yeah, just sort of an idea, something you can maybe play around with. Cheers, Guido. Hello, Bugatti. Great to meet you, sir. Been listening only recently, and you're great. Oh, thank you. I'm pretty much know this. Thank you. Did this low IV environment happen last time, and is it perhaps extended because of the size? Do you mean because of the bonds in particular? Is it the size of the bond offering? No, I really think it's connected to. I think it's connected to being on a down cycle, right? So last time we got this bond offering came in, a lot of what I think carried us into this peak in June was the fact that there was a lot of internalized buy volume during the January to March stretch that needed to be dealt with, right? That needed to be covered, that needed to be, processed, cleared out, something like that. Right. Thinking back into that whole beginning of that run, right? We had no GMEU, we had no IGME. These other funds were not in position to be able to take off some of this pressure. What I suspect is that a combination of, yes, kind of relieving, basically doing this into what should have been an off cycle. So rather than, rather than having this June moment be like January that then required 2 months of internalizing a lot of buy pressure and internalizing a lot of volatility, rather than having that take place between, say, June and September, and then doing a bond offering in September and then getting a repeat of that. This was done at the top of that cycle after a lot of that volume, that internalized volatility, had sort of been cooked off already and had sent us up. And then on top of that, right, we had GMEU and IGME, right? I think what can I make today, especially, has been talking about the fact that, like, the amount of volume that's been occurring, or the amount of, like, shares lended and shorted or something like that. I forget exactly what he pointed out there. But the idea that, or no, it was with FTDs. That's what it was. The number of FTDs that were logged on consecutive days in IGME, or excuse me, in GMEU, were such that it exceeded the total number of shares outstanding on the fund. So the fund had to have been, shares had to have been borrowed from the fund naked, right? That didn't exist for liquidity purposes, which could then be used as a like-kind security to meet and cover GME FTD obligations. I mean, in a certain way, yes. I mean, right, when GameStop's price gets adjusted down, IV goes down with it. So in the sense that we moved down quite significantly. Yes, in that sense, yes. Although I would say, right, the bond offerings themselves, at the bottom, once volume goes nuts, actually increases IV. Really what is producing the IV crush conditions is not the bond offerings themselves right now, so much as what's coming after them. So what drove that IV increase following the offering in March was everything that had been internalized from January into mid-March. Everything there. Maybe even going back to November, December, right? Because that was our big up move. Everything from, I don't know, maybe November, December was letting off steam or something like that. But then January to March, a lot of internalized volatility. All of that was let out basically in the April to early June run. At this point, there isn't any of that, right? Or there's less of that, let's say. Or if there isn't less of it, it's being distributed. This is the thing. It doesn't actually look like there's less of it. It just looks like it's being distributed across more funds now. So we have, actually, Richard's done a really good job, as always, pointing out a lot of what's going on with our FTDs. Let's take a look. It's nice because he's got everything all compiled right there all together. Where is you have XRT? You actually can't see XRT very well right here. XRT actually is having plenty of FTDs and did basically throughout this really volatile period here. So it's actually very interesting is very high rolling FTDs, right? So I've never seen anything like this. Between the 23rd and the 6th, just new piles of hundreds of thousands of FTDs. So 23rd, 866, almost 867,000 that were apparently cleared over the weekend. Then 28th, another 437,000. Then these either stayed on the tape, right? So these just kind of hung out there for a while across multiple days. I've never seen this, like a cluster of, this many just sitting there, unable to be cleared. And then they come back, right? So up 456,000. Apparently they get half of those away. And then another 400,000 come back. So, I mean, XRT is still doing weird stuff. We are seeing the outstanding significantly get rocked back and forth. Actually, this is what Richard's chart is really good for here. Over in outstanding. So, right, and basically all throughout this period, right, we can see XRT outstanding remains pretty high, right, throughout late March, right? We had this one moment, got down to 2.7 toward the end of the month, but in general, XRT outstanding pretty high, doesn't really seem super strained. Obviously, it's getting rocked back and forth a bit, but not really strained, not really shifting too much. But then once we get on the other side of the bond offering, down here, it gets really, really low. So right after the first bond offering, actually right before the day of, this is the 31st here. So actually right in the bond offering where we get down to 3.3, pretty low, comes back up to 5, shoots down on the 4th to 2.35, comes all the way back up to 9.65 on the 10th. Huge, massive creation. Goes all the way back down to, let's see, 3.4, back to 4.75, comes down to 1.75, which is the historic lowest all time on the 1st of May. Next day, shoots up to 5, comes all the way back up to 8.2. Then it starts going down again over a few days. Within a week, It is back to 2.55. So this is getting rocked back and forth, right? This is being created, redeemed, created, redeemed, created, redeemed, created, redeemed, just churning. Gets all the way back down to 2 in mid-June. Just the other day, just earlier this week, it got all the way back down to 2.5. So from 2 all the way up to 6.25, all the way back down to 2.05. So it is getting rocked back and forth. So it's not, right? It's not that this stuff is not happening. But something is going on with the extended liquidity network. And I think there's something likely with GMEU. I think that's it. Actually, does Richard have this on his chart too? I think he does. Yeah. And the difference here is right after the bond offering, the day of the bond offering, massive expansion in the shares outstanding for GMEU. Massive expansion. So started out right around 200-something thousand shares, basically, and then just stayed that way all throughout April, May. Slight increase towards the end of May, right? 320,000, 440,000, gets up into the 600s, end of May, early June, kind of hangs out in the 600 area for a few weeks into earnings, and then we get the bond offering on the 12th, right? Creation order comes in, outstanding more than doubles. 2 days later, it almost doubles again, and then it goes up to into the 2700s. So this in particular, this seems to be this kind of extended liquidity node that makes me think we are seeing this depressed volatility. One, because of, yes, we are off cycle. Two, yes, we are trading down at the lower end of our range. Three, it's a very slow time of the year. We don't have major catalysts coming up. Four, off cycle, we don't have a lot of, internalized, either we don't have a lot of truly internalized like deadline volume coming up right now, or GMEU is acting as this like escape valve gasket for these issues that we would otherwise see churn up volatility that are connected with XRT. That last component, I think, is really something of the difference maker there. GMEU is the problem. It seems to be that kind of one variable. At least it's a visible variable. Maybe something is happening in the background with swaps that we can't see, but I would say GMEU is kind of a visible variable that is different this time around, and different from the end of April. This was not a thing that we had to factor into our calculations or factor into our models prior to the 24th of April. So keep that in mind. Yeah, it might work, man. I mean, worst case scenario, what? Just like roll for credit out 2 weeks or something like that, and then close them when you're up. Right? Martingale Laval. If you get caught, right? Are they just going to keep sending it up? Like, go out like $2, go out 2 weeks. Make sure you're rolling for a credit so that, you're always actually getting a little bit more money each time you roll. Okay, then let's say, in 2 weeks, are they going to have, okay, it closed above 25 next week, but 3 weeks from now, are they going to let it close over 27? Okay, then you roll it again, roll to 29. In 4 weeks, are they going to let it close over 29? Okay, let's say that happens 3 times in a row. If you keep rolling for a credit, okay, you just get a bigger and bigger payoff. All right, now you're at 31. Are they in 6 weeks? Are they letting that? Let's say you charge hard up 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. In 6 weeks, they're going to let that close over 31. In a 7 week span, we're going to go from 23.50 to a close over 31. what are the odds of that happening? Knowing what you know about GME, right? So that kind of rolling strategy of, I'm trying to, you can roll out. You can roll out and across, but you can roll out and up, but just make sure you're doing it for a credit. Don't do it for a net debit. And the worst thing you do is you just bump out gains a little bit of time, but because you're getting a net credit, it's also ending up being a bigger payoff. Right? $2 increments, $2 2 weeks. If IV is really moved up like that, that should work out. But that's a way to kind of feel like, right? That's that video, martingaling the vol. There's like the Asian guy who was a prop trader who is like lives in his car now, and he just like records YouTube videos in nature. He's like Korean American or something. What's that guy's name? I don't even know. Drop that YouTuber's name in the comments if you know what I'm talking about. Yes, it is on, Tony. I think if the fund goes bankrupt, then yes, but like you can always pay in more money. That's the thing. It's like the fund can go bankrupt and investors can lose all their money. But then other investors could just be like, nope, we believe in this. Here's more money, fund. Right? Like what's his name? Who's the Mets guy? Steve Cohen? Didn't he like lose? Didn't he like bankrupt a fund and he was just like, well, let me try again? And there's like, okay. The greatest trader of our generation. You would think, but they can just keep bopping this stuff around, man. I'm not sure really, like if you have delayed settlement and you have, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 different instruments you can use to just keep bumping that stuff around, then, and you've got 33 trading days in between kind of decisions where you've got to cycle this stuff. That's it. I mean, GMEU, I think, really complicated the situation. Really. I think GMEU is specifically a GameStop liquidity engine. That's why it exists. It's specifically there because they can manipulate the outstanding of GMEU to essentially manufacture borrowable shares at a cost. It's not free, but it does prevent them from blowing up. It does prevent them from getting margin called or something. And depending on what their return, if their return is awesome on options, then paying a what is it down to now, like 15%? I think that's notable. You'd be crazy to do that otherwise. But if you've got a really good GME option, it's down to 12. Nah, they're fine. 12%. Fine. And there's a rebate too. So it's really 8. So fine. They're fine. I think you got that backwards. No, we're not stuck. We're not stuck. No, they're not dismantling the options game. Are you kidding me? No. The point of all this is to keep this going forever. Nobody wants us to stop. Not even the guys that are underwater on their short swap positions. They don't want this to stop. The options market on GME is too good. Nobody wants this to stop. That's what this is all about. That's why like Cohen keeps putting this stuff in. That's where this is priced. It's just like, nope, we're going to keep doing this. We'll keep doing this. You pay us money. You give us interest-free loans, and we'll make sure that we keep doing this. Yeah, that's the handshake at this point. And then Cohen will invest the money. That will transform the business. And then one day, however many years down the road, then it'll just become a compounder based on investment. Anybody who entered the bond game will at least get their money out, plus whatever they made trading options. So, no way. Yeah, I'm also excited for that, just to like see what's going to happen. How about SPY just like blasting all-time high today? That's pretty tight. Also, Bitcoin, it got close, got back up over 110. Bitcoin might go up next week though, especially if SPY dips. Yeah. Yeah, I always laugh because I'll spend all this time like looking at GameStop, because GameStop's awesome. But I know like sometimes I'll be like, why don't I trade SPY, right? Because I'll casually do like my context thing, and I'll be like, oh, okay, well, I'll call while I moved up to 620. Or probably, our overhead target for today is 625. And then we just went beeline for 625 in a half day today. Went to 626. I was like, could have done 0 DT calls, Don't do that. I don't do index options. But it's tantalizing. I know it's a trap, but maybe I want to be fooled. Maybe. What did they do last year? Last year they just did. Well, Roaring Kitty gave us a little surprise. Because he did the Andy dropping Woody tweet on September 6th. So this year they're gonna be September 9th. So maybe something that week, maybe from the company. I don't know, but we will get an earnings IV effect, right? So starting August 26th, thereabouts, we should start to see IV go up. Start to see it slightly tick up. Do you think the possibility of future bond offering related IV crutch will change the way you approach your short call strategy? What I think I might do, this is something Richard did last cycle that worked out pretty well for him. What I might try is, if we're approaching an earnings period, going really far out and down. So for example, like, let's say we're heading into September earnings. Let's say we're trading up around $30. Now earnings are going to be good. Let's say that. Actually, see, this is the thing. I don't know if we're going to do another bond offering in September. Maybe. That's the thing. It's like, estimating these things. But what you can do, let's say if you think a bond offering is coming up, going in earnings, you think there's going to be a bond offering. You could sell a portion of your position as like, let's say in the money, because you've got, you know, intrinsic value there. So it's going to work kind of like a put, right? Works kind of like a put, but it's a little different, right? So you're locking in as a profit the intrinsic value between where you are and whatever the strike is. So you could do like 25s or something like that. You're going to have all of that time value and IV baked into that thing. And, you know, I think it was something like when we were, yeah, like the December 2027 ones, like dropped 50% from the Bitcoin announcement to the bottom of the bond offering. So like, you can have a pretty sweet payoff if you do that. If you don't, if there isn't a bond offering, there is some sort of confidence that like some kind of offering is probably coming at some point. Do we, you know, necessarily walk away from doing that kind of cyclical thing entirely? I suppose it requires some situational awareness. Like if we're trading too low, you know, like is Cohen going to do a bond offering if we're at $25? Probably not. But if we're back up, you know, close to 30 again, maybe that's kind of the golden target. Like, hey, you let the price get up to around 30 and then I'll do a bond offering. But if you make us average down or something, no. Yeah. What exactly did you miss, man? Like on the way down? Just to get some sort of additional insight there so I can maybe share a bit better. Oh, we did this one. Gate blocking. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's very interesting, right? Let's actually hop over to the bonds. They're still over face value. They're trading them. Not a lot, but they are trading them. So they don't just need to. IV does have an effect. IV does get price. Oh, I meant to do this. You see that? Yeah, let's make this a little bigger. So you can see, right, they're trading at 107%. So 107% of face value. 107% of face value. So the delta on the bonds is being affected. IV does play a role, but you know, just like a call, you know, if you bought them at face value, you know, if you bought the calls essentially, you know, well priced, then the delta will increase as the underlying appreciates in value. Now, they won't gain value based on IV, but they will gain value based on the change in the underlying. So It's not maybe an optimal trading situation, but they can still trade this. Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm not going to do them. Remember when we called them that? Remember back in the day? I won't. I won't. That'd be interesting, right? I mean, Ultimator was and has been pointing out that Ultimator's been pointing out that Ethereum runs tend to slightly anticipate bullish movement in GameStop. So don't know what's going on there. Suggests they're swapped, right? Suggests their GameStop is in like an Ethereum swap or something. Lit Nomad. That's the guy's name. That's the guy. Go watch his video on martingaling the vol. Also, what is your picture? Is your picture from Don't Answer the Door? Is that the name of that game? Do you know the name where like people knock on the door and you got to like figure out if they're actually like aliens and if they're going to, do you know that one? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it'd be cool. Yeah, I don't know. What's keeping that? What's going on? Are you Bubbles from the Powerpuff Girls? You kind of look like Bubbles from the Powerpuff Girls. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, very good. Very good. Yeah, so going forward here, I could see something like we start to get a little bit of a correction because we kind of look a little overextended here in terms of the broader market. Although we're almost back up to basically our previous trend line. But I could see something of a correction, like as institutions reposition, right, coming out of here, kind of move back down, maybe over the course of the week into like July 11th or something. Maybe even July UpX, we come back down to like 600-ish, wherever the 20-day moving average is. Kind of reposition and then maybe start to move back up. And then maybe as we do that, we get a little pop over in BTC. Right, came back right up to this 110 line. And then maybe we finally get our breakout there. We crossed here. We did finally get that cross. Did finally get that cross. More bubbles from the bathtub scene in Big Short than bubbles the Powerpuff Girls. Oh, is that who is it in the Big Short? That's is that Margot Robbie? Margot Robbie is that scene. But your avatar is Bubbles from the Powerpuff Girls. Powerpuff Girls is good. I was like the Gennady Tartakovsky. Cool guy. He also did Samurai Jack, which was cool. Yeah, we almost closed like right on 110 there. Yeah. So I mean, that's what I could see. Not really more insight otherwise. But yeah. How are you guys? What are you guys doing for 4th of July weekend? Any big plans? Anybody get off work early today? Chat's a little sleepy today. Oh, wow. In the emergency room? That's awesome. Way to go, man. I mean, that's a tough schedule, but thank you for doing what you do. That's hard work. Is that a tranquilizer? Is trazodone a tranquilizer for animals? Lee is chilling, reading, staying cool. What are you reading, Lee? What's on the reading list right now? Gamma Liz. That's a great name. Oh, awesome. That's so cool. Where are you guys headed? That is indeed a tranquilizer. Going to the cheap casino on MS Gulf Coast. Mississippi? That's awesome. I've never been to coastal Mississippi. So like Biloxi? Is Biloxi on the coast? Oh, awesome. Big Bear. Oh, you live in Hollywood, man? That's cool. Yeah. I've been out to LA a couple times. Got some close friends live out there. That's definitely an advantage. That's an advantage for the fireworks. Ooh, North Michigan. Like on the like fingers of the glove or like Upper Peninsula, Michigan. Charts and T? Is that charts and T or charts and teal? Yeah. Yeah, that's a good look. That's probably an easier sell if you also let them know that you have dog tranquilizer. Expands the like pool appreciate, like, you know, you have a bigger, you can cast a wider net, right? Because if you didn't have dog tranquilizer, then you'd have to find somebody who has a pool and also very into dogs. Because like you can't go to a pool and like hang out outside and not bring your dog. But then the dog will want to go in the pool. So like the people have to also like the dog because they'd have to tolerate also the dog in the pool. Some people don't. Charts and tea leaves. Interesting. Interesting. Oh, awesome. I like Tennessee. I also have friends in Tennessee now. I like the Nashville area. That was nice. Franklin's kind of nice. Oh yeah. Oh nice. We got Tennessee crew. Next time I'm in down in Nashville, come hang out. Oh yeah, Biloxi. Yeah. All right, I do know where that is. Hadn't been there. There was a who was the playwright? Neil Simon. Didn't Neil Simon wrote a play called Biloxi Blues. Oh, double two. Oh, nice. Overnight train to Sweden. Awesome, man. That's very cool. Benton Harbor and Mackinac Island. Never heard of that. Sounds nice though. Oh yeah, no, don't take the tranquilizers and then go in the pool. Yeah, for a hot second I used to do like monologue showcases. I had like acting lessons when I was a tween. And I used to do monologues. That's what you got to do. You got to do the monologues. I never did anything with Biloxi Blues, but it was part of like a Neil Simon trilogy of plays. Biloxi Blues is number 2. I think Brighton Beach Memoirs was the first one. And then the third one was, isn't it Broadway Bound? Doesn't he like then become an actor on Broadway? Yeah. And it's with Matthew Broderick. There's like film adaptations with Matthew Broderick. Yeah. Hey, cheers, man. I appreciate that, Johnny. What am I doing? I am going to be probably working on. I have a conference coming up in a couple weeks in Aix-en-Provence in France. So I'm going to go there and talk about some of my research on the humanities side of things. So I am preparing for that presentation and continuing to read through some materials in advance of that talk. So it will be the Triennium. It's a conference that happens only once every 3 years for the International Association of Neo-Latin Studies. That's what I'll be. I'll be getting ready for that since I have a day off and I don't have to do as much analytical writing. I'm going to focus in on that. Yeah. Happy Independence, Guido. Cheers up there from north of the, what is that parallel? Is that the fifth? No, it's not the 54th. 49th? 49th parallel. I don't know, man. I've never been. It's, you might be surprised. You might be surprised. It's a 7-day conference. It's a week long. Conferences are not a week long. It is not like in humanities and stuff. You get maybe like 3 days or 4 days. It's a week long. And it is straight up presentations on topics that have to do with like Renaissance Latin from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And you have max 20 minutes. So it's a lot of people are going to give talks. And it's in Provence. It's going to be awesome. Have you ever been to Aix-en-Provence? It's really close to where the popes were in the 14th century. It's not far from Avignon. And it's also where it's very close to the University of Montpellier, where Francesco Petrarca studied. In case you're read up on your 14th century European literary history. Hey, Swag, we miss you, man. Thanks for stopping in. Good to hear from you. Yeah, I think it'll be cool. I mean, I'm going to talk a lot about classical education. So, I mean, that's kind of my interest, right? So my PhD is in Renaissance studies, and I studied, I mean, in a lot of ways, a lot of what I studied was the history of education. In particular, the history of education in Europe, especially Latin Europe, from kind of like the Middle Ages up to about the into like the 18th, early 19th century. So understanding that, but I mean, really into the kind of 15th, 16th century was more geared towards my dissertation. But yeah, specifically understanding Latin literature and kind of that, how that worked, and basically how like canon of classical texts came to be taught, how kind of, like the idea of high school and stuff, like that people would go to high school. Like there are tons of things we take to granted, but like the idea that, number one, that everyone should be literate, that's pretty recent. There's one culture in the history of the world that ever came up with the idea that everyone should know how to read, and it's Europe. No other culture did that. And they decided to do it, right? So that came out of the Renaissance and the Reformation. But then it was like, oh yeah, then everybody should go to, I mean, there are other cultures that have done things that were kind of very advanced in terms of the, breakthroughs in the amount of the population that was literate. Obviously, populations in the ancient world, China has a very rich educational history. Jewish culture has a very rich educational history in terms of literacy. So there's a lot of that. But I mean, this idea of like, oh yeah, no, like you're alive, so you have to read, is something that comes out of early modern Europe. So, but yeah, very interesting. So I'll be talking about that in the context of a specific text that was taught very frequently between about 1500 and 1800, and that is not really well known anymore. And there's a pretty extensive commentary literature on it that nobody's really written about. Yeah. Oh, it's big. Once you get the Latin book people giving papers out loud, takes a while. I think also a part of it is like it takes a really long time to do anything with research in this area, just because like you have to. I could show you some stuff. You guys want to see like some of my research stuff? Let's get some images here. So can y'all see this? So like what's actually really cool is this is something that's developed just over the past few years. So AI has actually been a really huge breakthrough in terms of the humanities. In terms of being able to read older books, it's super useful. So there's really advanced, this is a program called Transcribus. And it is a program that uses AI trained optical character recognition in order to, basically like transcribe, like mass transcribe old books. So basically, like what you'd have to do for a lot of this is like, I mean, and this isn't even that bad. This is an early printed book, so it's not that bad. Manuscripts get very, very difficult because they're all written by hand and everybody has like different handwriting and stuff. I mean, they conform to certain like archetypes, but it can get kind of difficult. But let's pop over here. Right. So you can see there's also like, you can see the handwriting in here, kind of interlinear gloss, this type of stuff. But then, reading the abbreviations can be a little bit of a challenge, and this kind of speeds up the process a lot. But anyway, kind of the thing when it comes to like doing this type of work historically up until like very, very recently, You just have to do all this by hand. You have to do this by naked eye. You just have to be like, what, spend a lot of time. Like, that's what I learned. Like, when I was in grad school, how to learn how to do this was just like, okay, here's what these abbreviations mean. Like, here, okay, figure out this guy's hand, like, do this, do the transcriptions, et cetera, et cetera. If you're just trying to catalog the books, it's not terrible. In fact, like, a lot of the paleographic work, you don't need to get too much into it. I guess if you're going to do like a lot of cataloging, you kind of need to know really, really in detail how to classify stuff. But like, if you want to understand what a lot of these folks are saying, like, it gets really, really difficult to decode these books, because first, like, you got to decode the handwriting, and then you have to decode the abbreviations, and then of course you have to translate it out of Latin so you can figure out, oh, what's this guy really saying? And that can be pretty arduous. So it takes a lot of it has historically taken a lot of time just to be able to have something to present at these types of conferences. So that's probably part of the reason why we're looking at a triennium versus doing something every year. But yeah, right. Or Carcassonne, which is in the Languedoc, which is right next to Provence, right? Carcassonne is in southern France. I will give my talk in English. I'll give it in English. It's a big international conference, so there'll be a lot of talks in French though. So, oh wow, I didn't realize that. Maybe it will be. Very good. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. Get to get my little history nerd thing on for a little bit. Maybe contribute some insights into the classical education space. Yeah, I think we're probably. I mean, this was kind of part of my idea with 21st century Renaissance as well. Is like, a big thing that drove a lot of the educational changes, like this whole thing of where all of a sudden, Europe very, very quickly went from, having literacy rates, because, in cities you'd have higher literacy, maybe you'd have 20 or 30% of the population, like in the Middle Ages. Well, yeah, 20 to 30% of the population might be literate in, say, like the 14th century or something like that. 15th century, maybe you'd get as high as like, yeah, you kind of cap out at like 40% in cities, like one in three men being literate, something like that. By the time you get to the 17th century, in places like the cities in Germany, in the Low Countries, like the Netherlands, cities in northern and eastern southern France, cities in England, North Italian cities as well. You're getting probably close to every other man is literate, maybe 1 in 5 women. And then by the time you get to the 18th century, late 18th century, you're probably looking at something like 70-ish% male literacy, maybe 40-ish% female literacy. By 1830, you're looking at like 90% male literacy and like 80% female literacy. So a lot of what occurred throughout this time period was driven by the fact that Europeans developed new communications technologies, in part connected to the printing press. And not only the printing press itself, but because specifically, this is why things like, right, this is why having the free market is so important. The Chinese developed printing press long before the Europeans developed the printing press. But the printing press did not take off in China for a couple of different reasons. Number one, it was not as convenient due to the alphabet, right? A Chinese, thousands of character alphabet, not as useful, way more complicated machine. So not as practical to be able to use a kind of movable type press in that way. Whereas it's a lot easier in, say, Europe when you're using a syllabary, or even if you had a syllabary, it'd be better. An alphabet, right? A phonetic alphabet where you have, only like 20 something characters, 30 with kind of extended characters. But also having a market for this stuff. So if you have, right, so that educational culture, that idea of everybody should be literate or more people should be literate, precedes the generation of these book markets, right? So the fact that you have this demand, this increased demand, and have a larger percentage of your population that reads, you create a demand for literacy, and then you say have the ability to generate independent markets. Okay, now you have this sort of organic growth of a desire to have more and more stuff produced. The fact that more and more stuff gets produced, and this is a market, it ends up feeding back on itself, and then you have consequences in the realm of science and art and music and literature and things like this, and so that creates a feedback loop. And now it's like, okay, everybody's going to be literate. So very, very cool things, right, of course, occurred as a result of that really dynamic change in communications technologies. Early industrial revolution, you get the steam press, which helps so you can really, really mass produce written stuff. But then, right, we don't get a real revolution in communications technology. Probably, yeah, really in able to create stuff, probably not until like late 19th or early 20th century. So you start to get like, you can start to do recording, you can start to do like early film, stuff like that, right? But not too much. It's a pretty limited communications technology. The radio gets a bit better, television a little bit more. But now, the state of things with the internet, right? The fact that we're doing this, the fact that we have things like Twitter and Reddit, YouTube, all of this stuff, podcasts more than you could listen to in a lifetime, just on one topic. So all of that stuff, right, I think is we've seen so many changes occur so fast over, like, let's just take the past 30 years, right? 1995, like, what was the internet in 1995? We were not doing this in 1995, right? We just kind of came out with like Walkman and audiobooks in like 1985, like portable CD players. So I think things have changed, right? We've seen so much change occur while the same generation of people are in many of our educational institutions. So like in 1985, when we came out with like, oh, you can put books on tape and then walk around with them as long as you have batteries from, Radio Shack. The same people are professors, right? The same people are educators now that were educators then. The same people are, or very close to the same people are presidents of universities or whatnot, right? So you kind of have this pretty big bottleneck where educational institutions, being conservative institutions in and of themselves, right, they are resistant to change. And right, if you think about like part of their primary function is to conserve knowledge and to conserve information, right, about the past. They are, as much as they are educational institutions, they are also massive conservatories of information of all kinds, and art and media of all kinds. Even the ones that adapt and start experimenting and developing and deploying new technologies very quickly, by and large, they don't change their structure and the way that they go about things very quickly at all. So we are, I think, in that sense, right, we're already in the midst of probably the next wave of a very dynamic transformation of education that we're going to see play out over the next several decades, especially as, let's say, the current, whoever is currently at the reins of most of our educational institutions ends up, retire, die, move on, etc. So very interesting to see what comes up there, but I think looking at the Renaissance and looking at the Reformation and sort of looking at the 15th, 16th, 17th centuries into the early 19th centuries, I think gives you an idea of, just what sort of the new positioning of a communications technology can do to these types of institutions. So I think on that front, we'll be seeing some really, really exciting and dynamic and dramatic changes occurring to many of our educational structures over the next. I mean, we already have, but we'll see so many more take place, in the coming decades. So very, very exciting times to be alive, right? As long as we can hold everything together, and as long as we can just hold it together, Yeah. Oh yeah, that's it too, right? Financial literacy, different than numeracy. Well, COVID was certainly very interesting because what's interesting with, let's say, who has been affected most, let's say in terms of educational outcomes by COVID, and this is always the case, right? Whenever you have some kind of really abrupt disruption of the status quo, it is always the least adaptable people who suffer the most. So if you take the best performers in math and reading scores and all this stuff, everybody took a dip because of COVID. Let's say what happened to COVID in education. The best performers, let's say the top 10%, which corresponds right to the, highest in terms of IQ and mostly weighted towards IQ, but, conscientiousness to a certain extent as well. Within, I think, within like 2 to 3 years, their scores were basically back up to baseline. So they took a dip in 2020, 2021, right? So they took a dip, but by like 2023, 2024, they were essentially back up to baseline. So they adapted quickly and resumed course. The farther down you go, so you go down to 75th percentile, they took a bigger hit, did not quite get back up, right? You go down to 50th percentile, took another hit. You go down to, let's say, 25th percentile, the bottom quartile of performers. It's not evident that these students will ever be able to get an education in those areas, that they'll ever be actually able to regain progress in those fields. They are essentially at a permanent disadvantage now for the rest of their lives because of that break in the status quo for a couple of years and like the way that we handled, school lockdowns and how all that went, right? Like I understand there's considerations as far as, obviously there were things to be concerned about. But that is a consequence that I'm not sure we know how to deal with. In the sense that by kind of breaking this kind of year after year kind of course of, okay, this kind of incremental up you go, by kind of breaking that for a couple years and replacing it with whatever they had instead during those years, the bottom quartile is kind of lost to formal education now. Unless we come up with some other kind of intervention to figure out how to get them back on track. But it's like, right, 50th percentile and kind of up, like they're still recovering, but like bottom quartile and down, it's just like, not only have they not recovered, but their performance continues to go down in terms of their ability to by achievement metrics, educational achievement metrics, let's say. Which is a problem. Because in 20 years, yeah, net literacy and net numeracy will go down. And most people are not, you know, if you think, like, if you've met some people and you're like, you finished school, like, you know, no knock against them. It's, you know, just not necessarily for everybody, right? But like, all right, well, we're going to have some challenges. It's a case of, you know, the rich get richer and the poor will get poorer, something like that. I mean, not necessarily just in terms of economic outcomes, but like you will have some severe. There will be some severe repercussions for very, very large segments of the population as a result of what has occurred. These guys again. They always do. That's just, you know, that's just them though. It's fine because they don't take salary, right? They don't take a salary. But you always get excited for the Form 4s, and then it's Daniel Moore and is it Mark Robinson? Unfortunately, man, it's going to be that same. It's going to be that same principle that I just talked about, right? So I'll give you an example. I'll show you the difference, let's say, between, like, if I think about the way that I approach using AI and I look at the way that, like, some of my students when I was teaching approached AI. Some of my students approached AI and they're like, oh, I have a problem. And the problem is I have to write a paper for this class and I don't care about it. So I'm just going to have AI write my paper. Okay. To what end? Right? To what end was that? Oh, well, it just makes things easier. Well, but what's easier? Like, easier for what? Oh, so I just can go and then stare at videos or something? Or I don't know. Right? Okay. I go ahead and use AI and I go like, oh, wow, I can read 10 times the 16th century Latin books now because of how much faster I can do like optical character recognition transcription. This is incredible. Right? So in the sense of AI is a very powerful tool for good in the hands of those who, let's say, have the particular virtue to direct it towards the right purpose. And it's a very powerful tool for vice and for self-degradation in the hands of, right? It accelerates. It just accelerates. So it's going to be the case of those who aim it at the right target are going to be able to reach those targets at an alarmingly accelerated pace. And at the same time, those who aim it towards, you know, toward vicious targets, the same thing is going to happen. And so those who are advantaged already based on their gifts are, you know, the margin will increase. The margin will increase. Right? I think being literate, really, I think AI may prove, and various types of AI tools, especially being able to work with AI, it's like going to, it's like being literate in, let's say, 1500. Like, if you could read in 1500, which also required that you knew Latin, because, you know, 90% of all literature was in Latin. So if you knew that, if you knew how to read, not only could you read, you could read things, number one, but number two, you could talk to anyone in any major institution throughout the entire European continent, because in order to read, you needed to learn Latin. So anyone else who read also knew Latin. So you could go to England and talk to a priest or a merchant or a mayor or an administrator or anything. You could talk to the king's counselors. You could talk to anybody there. You could talk to bankers, right? All of this. Why? Because they all knew Latin, because they had to learn Latin in order to learn how to read. Okay. Now, if you go out there and you talk to anybody that's like, oh yeah, I use computers, and they're like, I have Microsoft Word and Google, and you have an AI assistant, you have 5 AI assistants that help you with different things, like, whatever your job is. You will quite literally run circles. You will lap people in whatever you're doing if you can be AI literate. And you will meet others who are also AI literate, and you will combine, and then that will accelerate your progress even more towards whatever you're trying to do. Yeah. So yeah, man, I think that's a big part of it. I think that's a big part of it. I mean, we're more interconnected now than ever in many ways. But I think, yeah, I mean, look, a lot of this, I think, is in order for us to take fullest advantage of this stuff, I think we have to, I think everyone needs to have a clear idea of really who we are as human beings. And I think that most of us continue, most of the way that, we're educated is, I think we continue to get educated into like kind of, 19th century or like kind of early 20th century models of human psychology, something like that, kind of at best. And at worst, some pathological combination of confused things about who we are and what we're capable of. I think we tell ourselves a lot of lies as a society about who we are, and that definitely doesn't help things. But yeah, I think really for us to unlock our potential, to avoid, let's say, the downward spiral into the land of brain rot at the hands of, as slaves to AI rather than as being able to use AI as a tool, as a helper to us, then right, then we'll need to acquire better understanding therein. Yeah. Works the same thing as money, right? You will only be able, and I see this in my life too. You will only be able to do as much with whatever resources you are given. Let's say it's money, in proportion to the extent to which you have cultivated virtue in yourself. If your desires never really go beyond, let's say, eating tasty food, watching entertaining shows, and being entertained on vacations, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter how much money you have. Like, you're only ever going to use it for that. If you lack a certain degree of self-control, like wherever your vices are, just giving you money, having money, just accelerates your trajectory down that path. So before you get, the capability to pursue things at an accelerated rate, make sure you're aiming at the right things. Because if you're aimed at something hedonic, just hedonic gratification somehow, and then somebody hands you AI and, you know, $10 million or something because GameStop goes to the moon, then AI and, you know, that $10 million is going straight to whatever pleasures you've identified. But you'll go toward that target faster and to a depth that you would never have imagined. And also bear the costs of doing that faster and going to a depth that you wouldn't have ever been able to imagine otherwise. Indeed. Cheers, man. Thank you for asking the good questions. I'm always happy to talk about this stuff. I think about this stuff, like, this is always going on in my head, like, all the time. I'm always like, so it's good to, you know, I love being able to talk to people who want to hear about it, who want to share their thoughts too. Yeah, cheers, man. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Character accelerator, or money is a character accelerator or magnifier. If you're nice and squared away before getting famous in a windfall, then you're good. Yeah, work on yourself. Hey, right, this is why, right? Why do you know most child stars end up not living good lives, right? It's because they get a windfall when they're extremely young. They don't have time to actually, like, develop themselves as people. They're always being pushed out on stage. And then finally, when they kind of get a chance to step back, whatever they haven't worked on, they've got all kinds of money to plow into that. If GME is operationally profitable this quarter, I think it should be valued at more than 25 and less than 35. That's my outlook. Love to be wrong. But I think, you know, if we do go over 35, I think we get another offering of some kind. That's my thought there. But anyway, I think that is where we're going to wrap up. We will wrap up the stream for today. I'm getting a bit sleepy. But hello, everyone. Yeah, thank you so much for dropping in today. Please enjoy your long weekend. Happy Independence Day. Blessings to GMErican, of course. And look forward to seeing you guys on Monday. And if you're bracing for whatever's going on with tariffs, right? So enjoy your vacations, enjoy your trips, enjoy Michigan, enjoy Sweden, enjoy Biloxi, enjoy living in Tennessee, enjoy California, enjoy tranquilizing your dog, and possibly meeting someone with a pool. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks very much, everybody.